Hi guys and girls, welcome back to my channel. I do hope you're doing well. Guys, welcome to kicking 2025 off with our first Scandals with Shan. And we are 90% there, finished almost with the Scandals with Shan setup. We have got our little book series. However, I feel like the camera angle, I might be putting you back a bit more soon because we're in the process of putting the shelving up. So I am very excited. I cannot wait to actually show you this room once it's done, because we have a little dark corner and then we have the filming and the wardrobe side. But yes, this is kind of how we're going. My chair, I cannot wait to just sink back into this, but I thought I would show you how we're looking at the moment for the little bit of setup. We've got the books, more books. As you can imagine, there's plenty of books, and there will be a book today, my lovely, that we'll be going through. The Serial Killer exhibition book. If you saw yesterday's upload, me and Dan went to the Serial Killer World Tour, which is at London. I will leave it down below if it is still live at the moment. And guys, when I tell you, I was in like my true crime best little land there. We spent over 2 hours, and one of my friends at work, she was like, we was ranting about in an hour, and I was like, you know when you think like, oh, it's gonna be pants, but we absolutely loved it. The amount of people that we hadn't heard of, like abroad, in America, over Europe, like you kind of just, you hear of the big names, but the big names were nothing compared to some of the others. I was so shocked at the fact of how many some people had killed compared to others. For example, Gein only killed 2 people. There was people there that had killed 40, 50, 60. One of them was called the chessboard killer because he was trying to accumulate 64, I believe it was, to replicate every single item of chess. You know when you just think, huh? So I thought, with that in mind, and we was going to that this year, what would you say is the worst serial killer? Who is your worst serial killer? So I asked you over on my email and Instagram. They're always linked down below if you want to get involved. And basically I was like, you know what? Fire away. Who do you think is the worst serial killer out there? Because I definitely want to delve more into serial killers and true crime stories. And this is where these books come in handy. This is where all of the true crime fascinations come from, because there's a lot of cases that I've been hearing of recently that I'm like, I haven't heard of that. And there is a parcel that I believe you'll see in the 75 soft challenge. I think you'll see it. One of you lovelies very, very kindly purchased me off my Amazon wishlist the first volume of the Ryan Green true crime books. And now those, like, that's ideally what I would love top shelf. That's a series that I've been looking at. And at first I thought, you know what, I'll buy all the books individually. That was very costly. And then he bought out these anthologies of 4 stories per book. And I believe there's 6 volumes. No, there's 8 volumes at the moment. And one of the people whose face I recognised from the front cover of one of his books was in the Serial Killer World Tour, and I was like, oh, I know who she is. But let's not sit here and rabbit. I am far too excited for this. As you can tell, I'm going to probably bring you in a bit closer because I want to get comfy in the chair, because I tell you what guys, once I get snuggled in this chair, we're not moving. I'm actually probably even going to go and get a little blanket because it is a little bit nippy in here. We've got the heating on, but I don't know what it is. It's like Baltic conditions right now. But anyway, Shan, stop rabbiting and let's kick off Scandals with Shan 2025 with who would you say is the worst serial killer? There we go. You're all zoomed in nice and close. So yes, as I say, I asked you over on Instagram and emails, and let's see who you guys came back with the worst serial killers. And then first one, Harold Shipman. So yes, Harold Shipman, he was in the exhibition also. I wonder if this actually has a glossary to say whereabouts the people are, because this book follows it as you walked around in the exhibition. So they had so many different sections, some from areas. Oh, hold on. Is it maybe going to be in here, or did they not? I do remember seeing Harold Shipman in here. Honestly, guys, like, this book is just mind blown. Because, hold on, was he there? No, I thought he was. So Harold Shipman was a doctor. There he is, The Shadows of London. I'm actually going to like read you little bits and bobs from the books as to how they described him on the tour. So Harold Shipman, Dr. Death. A few decades later from John Christie of The Monster of Rillington Place, another horror shook Britain. Harold Frederick Shipman Jr., born on the 14th of January 1946 in Nottingham, exploited his profession as a family doctor to administer lethal doses of morphine to his patients. Between 1975 and 1998, Shipman may have killed between 200 to 300 people. He forged death certificates to appropriate the belongings of his unfortunate patients. He was arrested on the 7th of September 1998 and sentenced to 15 life terms. He committed suicide in his cell the day before his 58th birthday. These two individuals, although separated by time and method, left an indelible mark on the history of British crime. While Christie was a murderer operating in the shadows of London apartments, Shipman exploited his status as a doctor to perpetrate his atrocities behind a facade of respectability. So this one, they say that John Christie and Harold Shipman were the shadows of London. So John Christie was, we actually seen a book about this, and I said to Dan, I've not heard of this place, Rillington, and it was one of the big setups that they had there. So I was like, you know what, I'm definitely going to look into this more, because apparently in this, actually, I'll tell you what, let's read John Christie, and then because it links in with Harold Shipman at the end bit. So John Christie, the monster of Rillington Place. Born John Reginald Halliday Christie on the 8th of April 1899 in Northaram, John Christie, known as the monster of Rillington Place, appeared to be an ordinary man. However, between 1943 and 1953, so this is about 30 years before Harold Shipman, he became one of Britain's most infamous killers, strangling at least 8 people, including his wife, Ethel. His crimes took place in London, primarily in his apartment at 10 Rillington Place, Notting Hill, and the bodies of his victims were found in various places within the apartment and gardens. Christie was captured on the 31st of March 1953 and sentenced to death by hanging. He is currently buried within HM Prison, Pentonville in London. So he was hung. Okay. And these are kind of like what they call the first type of monsters within London. So Harold Shipman, as I say, I mean, it baffles me because I do feel that stuff like this still goes on. I feel that people get exploited through certain industries, and is there a modern day Harold Shipman going on that's getting covered up? I think the biggest modern day Harold Shipman was the Big C. I still believe that is man-made, and whoever made that, it's worrying to think that something like that could just be made, you know. But within the circumstances of Harold Shipman, not nice. Another one, Shipman, as he used to trust to befriend them as their doctor. And then, so you believe that you're bringing him in as your family doctor, and actually he wants to pop you off. The Moors murderers. There was a big section on the Moors murderers, and it was quite unsettling to read, I can't lie. Let me try and find them in here, because they almost glamorized part of it for couple serial killers, as to like how it resonated with them and like what the kicks were and everything like that. Let me just try to find the photos as well at the exhibition. I would have put a disclaimer beforehand, because honestly, some of the photos were very graphic, and it was a bit like, like very, very near the point. But it's what you expect to go there. Dan saw some bits and was like, really? I was like, yeah. So this is just like, it's one of the ones, the Moors murderers, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, it's very much like they're compared sometimes to Fred and Rose West. Obviously, it was slightly different circumstances with the victims, but another one of you said on here, the Moor murderers picking up the children and killing them. No. Yes. So they had their own page, as you can see in here, for like it was almost glorifying it as like, it's hard enough to be a serial killer on your own, but then if you can get it with a partner, it's how they bounce off each other. But I will read you this. However, these two couples, because I believe someone said about the Wests in another one, their backstory is actually very troubling, and I can't imagine the things that they've done. First off, doing it as people, but then actually doing it as a couple. I don't know what would make someone tick like that. And yeah, so here we go. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. Ian Brady, a troubled and solitary child who admired the Nazis, grew up committing robberies, petty thefts and working various odd jobs. He began killing at around 25 years old. I was becoming single at 25, and that's when people start their murdering spree. It baffles me. Myra Hindley, the daughter of a violent and alcoholic war veteran who beat his wife, was often incited by her father to start fights among her peers. Myra met Ian Brady, who had recently been released from prison when he was still a teenager, and became completely subservient to him. Together they were responsible for the Moor murders, a series of killings that took place between July 1963 and October 1965 in the Greater Manchester area of England. Their victims were 5 children and adolescents aged between 10 and 17, 4 of whom were also sexually assaulted. Pauline Reed, John Kilbride, Keith Bennett, Leslie Ann Downey and Edward Evans. 2 victims were found buried in a grave on the Saddleworth Moor, and a 3rd grave was discovered on the moor in 1987, more than 20 years after Brady and Hindley were captured in 1966. Keith Bennett's body was never found, but was suspected that he was also buried there. Now this one, because I believe his parents have just recently died or they've passed, and you had the story that they never knew where he was. That was all they wanted. They just wanted to know where he was. And I think for people to then to withhold that information, not only have you committed the most awfulest of crime to their child, but you won't even give them the peace to know where they are. It goes to show what a piece of work they actually was, my lovelies. The young victims were all killed by strangulation or throat slashing, sometimes with their screams being recorded on tape. Initially, the police were aware of only 3 murders. Further investigations reopened in 1985 after a prison confession from Brady led to the discovery of 2 more bodies. Myra Hindley was sentenced to life imprisonment and died of an illness in 2002 at the age of 60. Ian Brady, declared insane, was confined to Ashworth High Security Psychiatric Hospital, repeatedly requesting to be executed. He died in prison on the 15th of May 2017 at the age of 79. In these instances, this is where I feel our punishments need to go back to the olden days. I can't lie, it showed you at the end of the tour the different types of punishment, whether that be you had the electric chair, gas chambers, firing range, hanging, lethal injection. For me personally, and I please don't want to offend anyone, prison is not a deterrent. It's not a deterrent in the UK, if anything. I've seen documentaries and programs about prisons abroad, and don't get me wrong, some of them prisons, yes, you commit a crime, that is your punishment. For UK prisons, it's not like that. Whenever you see a UK prison, it's glorified. They have this, they have that, they can do what they want, they have access to outside. It doesn't seem to be a deterrent. And in instances like that, that for me could have constituted for any of the old time capital punishments for what they've done. And when you think 1966 they were captured, is that too late? Because some places still give capital punishments. Extradite them and do it under other laws, because for me, something like that, they should not have been allowed to be fed, watered and sustained by a taxpayer. Again, I don't want to offend anyone on this. This is just my personal opinion. But I think for that level of just pure evil, why should they be kept in a nice bed? Why should they be fed? They showed no mercy to the parents that wanted to know where their son was. They showed no mercy to the children that they attacked and killed. Yeah, I would agree with you that they are up there with some of the worst. It's just, you look at the pictures, and one of the books that I read, Life Inside, if you remember last year, Linda Calvey, she was arrested for murder, which she didn't do, but then she had robberies, etc. And she was actually in the prison with Myra Hindley. And she said she just would not tolerate her. And the guards would say, you need to like go and do duties with her. And she's like, no. Like, I'm not doing that because of what she's done. And I stand by her there. I absolutely do. One of my lovelies says, Stephen Wright, the Suffolk Strangler. Now, I don't know if he's actually in here, but there was a section on him, guys. We was not aware of this. We was like, okay. And then someone mentioned it. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. And they was like, do you know there's a Suffolk Strangler? And I was like, what? It was weird because Dan always used to say to me when we moved, you're going to become like a serial killer. And I'm like, hey. And I always said I would be the Suffolk Strangler, not realising that that title had already been taken. I don't believe he's in the book here, my lovelies. I do apologise, but there was a segment on him, and from what I gather, he murdered, was it 4 or 5 women within the Suffolk area, all through strangulation. But what is actually in here, which kind of shocked me, I didn't think it was this high, the causes of death that serial killers choose. And where are we? No, that's the alluring. The 10 most common ways to kill for a serial killer, and strangulation was number 2 at 21.7%. Like, I was actually quite shocked at that. So, I mean, clearly it's a thing, but yeah, I might see if there is actually any literature on the Suffolk Strangler, because it would actually tie in with the county we now live in, and also it's another true crime series that we haven't looked into, my lovelies. One says, Robert Maudsley, a horrible cannibal serial killer. Now, I don't think he was there. I haven't got my phone on me. I don't think he was there, but I feel I have heard of him from The Cannibal. Was he, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel he was an inmate who cannibalised on his fellow roommates when he was in prison. Let me know on that, my lovely, or if anyone else knows anything about him. I feel that that could be him. Definitely Israel Keys. I can't watch anything about him as he terrifies me. Now, I've never heard of that. That wasn't at the exhibition either. But best believe after this video, I will be checking that out. If you have a thing, where are we? Oh, it's over there. I've got boxes, guys, and it's under there. But I actually am too comfy to move. So what we can do is I'll give you a catch up in the vlogs of these if I've managed to find who these people are. But has anyone heard of Israel Keys? Please do let me know down below. One of my lovely says, I can think of a few, but to name one, I would say H.H. Holmes and the Murder Castle. Again, guys, you are giving me like serial killer ammunition here, because these are some that I don't know, but they could potentially be in here. That is the fun of all discovering. And another one that I can actually show you, one of my lovelies says, Fred and Rose West and the Yorkshire Ripper. So Peter Sutcliffe, there was a huge bit on him because they believe he took his inspiration from Jack the Ripper, and the way of which, talking of Jack the Ripper, that's his. Here we are. So Peter Sutcliffe was the Ripper of today's Great Britain. There he was. And he says, Peter Sutcliffe, known as the Yorkshire Ripper, was convicted in 1981 for the murder of 13 women and the attempted murder of 7 others. He primarily targeted prostitutes in Leeds and surrounding areas, incapacitating them with a hammer before repeatedly stabbing them in the neck, abdomen and chest. This modern British serial killer, a missionary emulating Jack the Ripper, was sentenced to life imprisonment despite being declared suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, and he died in prison in 2020 due to complications related to COVID. Now, the fact that he lived that long, and I remember, I feel he might have been on a day release or been allowed out for the day, because there was a photo of him in the newspaper and it was like, the Ripper's alive or something like that. And when you looked at him, he had no remorse. He was just plodding along doing his normal thing. And if I remember correctly, there was a documentary, and I feel he only got caught because he either went to the police station or he was tugged for having like a towel light out or something to do with his tyre. It was a car related incident. And I think from the police looking over it, they found something that they thought could have been evidence towards all of these killings that had been happening. And that was how he got caught out. If not, who knows how many more he could have gone on to. 13 confirmed kills with the attempted murder of 7 others. I was actually quite surprised. I thought to be a serial killer you had to kill 7. Dan thought it was 4. Or was it the other way around that we thought? I know one was 4 and one was 7. You only actually have to kill 2. 2 people on separate occasions, not say if you went in somewhere and killed 5 people, that would be classed as mass murder and not serial killer. So it's 2 people or more on separate occasions, separate incidents. And that quite shocked me, because at first I thought, so that's why there's so many. You're going to have just people who have had 2. But there was people in double digits. A lot of them was in double digits. And you're kind of like, oh, okay, like, it's real. Obviously it is real, but some people was in there for just 2, but it was the way. So Ed Gein, for example, he murdered 2 people, but it was the way in which he done it. No one had ever seen anything like that before. And there was a poster and it said, before Gacy, before Dahmer, before Bundy, there was Gein. And it was almost like he was the starting founder of this. But me and Dan was talking and we said, you can see sometimes with killers how they replicate previous killers. So they may take inspiration from someone, for example. But no one has ever gone to the levels of Gein. In terms of, there's been decapitation and cannibalism and everything like that moving forward with serial killers. But I have not heard, and we didn't see any further ones, of people wearing skins. Ed Gein was... It's been based around like, so if you've seen the film Chainsaw Massacre, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they showed you all of the films that like, the films have been based off of serial killers. And Ed Gein is one of the highest, he's not even a producer, but he's the biggest inspiration, as weird as that is to say, for movies. And it's because of the way he committed the crimes, because it was never heard of, and it hasn't really been heard of since, in terms, as I say, he used to excavate bodies, use skins, like that hasn't been done. And he in essence is like one of a kind within the true crime industry, because what made him go like that, a lot of the things in that serial killer exhibition was to do with the mother. Either they was mollycoddled by the mother and they wanted to escape. They either didn't have a relationship with the mother or they didn't have one. So they had a hatred towards women, and that was why they targeted women. Very, very interesting to read on, my lovelies. But as one of you have said, Fred West and Rose Letts. Now this, I will say, is actually very disturbing to read. So if you know their backstory and you want to skip, say, for a minute while I'm reading this, I don't blame you, because when me and Dan read this, we was a bit sickened, to be perfectly honest. So Fred West, he began a sexual relationship with his mother at the age of 12 and grows up abusing and inflicting pain on women and enjoying this. At the age of 17, a motorcycle accident leaves him in a coma for a week, further aggravating his mental stability. In 1962, he marries a woman who is already pregnant, whom he then rapes and brutalises, eventually killing her and burying her with her unborn child. A moody and precocious teenager, Rosemary Letts, is abused by her paranoid schizophrenic father. She runs away from home at the age of 15, and after meeting 28-year-old Fred West at a bus stop, with whom she moves in and started working as a prostitute. They live together with his two daughters, Charmaine and Anne-Marie, from a previous marriage. Their first daughter, Heather Ann, is born in 1970, while Fred goes in and out of prison for theft and fraud. By 1983, Rose had given birth to 8 children, which Fred accepts as his own, even though at least 3 of them were conceived by clients. When Rose's father finds out his daughter is prostituting herself, instead of getting angry, he also wants to have sex with her. Between 1967 and 1987, Fred and Rose kidnap, torture and strangle 11 teenagers, including their daughters Heather Ann and Charmaine. They lure victims by offering a room for rent or a nanny job, then once killed, dismember them and bury the remains under the kitchen or in the garden. They are caught when one of their daughters reveals their incestuous relationships Fred maintained with her and her sisters. Rose, tried in October 1995, is found guilty of 10 murders and sentenced to life in prison, a sentence she is serving at HM Prison, Newhall in Flockton, West Yorkshire. Fred was found dead by hanging in his cell in Winson Green Prison on Birmingham on the 1st of January 1995 during pre-trial detention awaiting trial. He was never convicted. For me, that's a coward's way out. You take your time, you take your punishment, but he wanted a way out and she is still in her sentence serving. Good. The fact that you can do that to your own children, but I do believe something with that, neurologically through their upbringings, it would have stemmed them to be like that way. But this is where I get fascinated, because I feel if people have committed such crimes... Oh, sorry, my lovelies, we've been rabbiting so long, it just started flashing to me and I was like, oh no, I'm not done yet. With, say, serial killers, I think that their brains should be tested, taken for neurological science and seen as to how their brain differs to a normal person. Like, what made them go to those extremes? What were the triggers? Was something damaged? Was there a lobe that wasn't fully developed? Like, what could make someone go from that young, having those tendencies, to then growing up and becoming something like that? I don't know, and it's very worrying. Anything to do with the harming of children, I just don't understand what would make someone tick or someone get off on something like that. I just think it's odd. It's odd, it's wrong, it's evil, and this is where I think there should be certain capital punishments brought back, because you get convicted, you go into prison, you have your 3 square meals a day. Prisoners, in my opinion, get treated better than the old people in England. And that just says it all for the system, don't it? And I think if you had tougher penalties, you probably wouldn't have half of the crimes going on. And would that ever be something they bring back? Probably not, because you have so many groups now for human rights and everything like that. But what about the human rights for the victims? What about the children who never has a life to have a human right? If they take a life, as the old saying is, an eye for an eye. If they had to do it, where it's trapped under Sorry guys, I say I will, the ones that I didn't know, I will look at them in another vlog. But I'm very much like, you do as you would be done by, and whatever you put out, you sow what you reap, or you reap what you sow, I think is the saying. And if you put that out there, you've got to expect something back. You've got to expect something back. But unfortunately for the UK, it doesn't seem to be like that. But as I say, there are prisons abroad that I've watched documentaries and I'm like, that is a prison. That should be how you are treated. You shouldn't be glamorized. You shouldn't have these luxuries. You're in there for some of the most heinous crimes, and it's like a holiday camp, like a boot camp. And I'm just like, no. One of my lovelies says, let's go. I think that Jack the Ripper is the worst serial killer. Going out in his car, picking women up and ripping them apart. Mostly prostituting women. And it's a shame, no matter what your background, no woman should be killed in that way, as he was killing so many. So Jack the Ripper was really the big vocal point as you walked into the exhibition. But what I didn't realise was, at the time, there was also a Jack the Ripper in France called Joseph, if I remember correctly, and they feel he may have based himself around this person. So Jack the Ripper, these are probably some of the most probably graphic photos. They do not hide the extremities, and they don't hold back any evidence when it comes to Jack the Ripper. They're very, yeah. So me and Dan, if you remember last year, we done the Jack the Ripper tour, and they had a map at the exhibition and it showed all the victims, and I was like, it's so weird to think we've been to all them areas. Like, we went to all of the places on the map in this tour, and to be honest, I said to him the other day, should we actually rebook that this Halloween, because it was such a good tour. And not only is it a tour just walking around, there's so much history you learn about London. And now if we go to those areas around Whitechapel, we're like, do you remember that's where? And it's like, oh yeah. You're walking around history everywhere in London and you don't know what type of history it is. But one of the ones that we remember was Mary Kelly. And they had a very vivid reenactment set of her. And this, see, for me as well, in the times of when it was, these photos, it's just, I mean, I am going to say, turn away now, my lovelies, if you're not into this. I will count down from 3, because I'll just do a 3, 2, 1. But this is the actual crime scene photo. And when you think that a human can inflict this on another human, you ready? If you're not feeling, close your eyes. 3, 2, 1. It's graphic. It's graphic. And to think that someone could do that, and then you obviously have all of the crime scene photos from the other ladies. But there was no, for me, he was targeting older women. But Mary Jane Kelly, she was his youngest at 25. And the others were like late 30s. A lot of them was in their 40s. And again, was it because he had a bad relationship with his mother? Is it he didn't like older women? Did he think that older women shouldn't be out prostituting themselves? He was very vicious. So there was a lot of knife and stabbings. There was a lot of opening up bodily parts, abdomen, stomachs, knife to the throats, disemboweling. One of them, the lady, she was 46, he cut V's in her cheeks. She was the only one to have something like that. And he took away her uterus and left kidney. Very, very graphic. Absolutely. Like, for that to have been there all those years ago, and you didn't have the DNA or the forensics or any of the crime stuff that we have now. But this was Jack the Ripper, the profiling of a serial killer. So 2 professors, in essence, profiled. So the first one was the profile of the killer, Dr. James Bond. James Bond. No, it's not. Dr. Thomas Bond. Surgeon, 1888. The killer must be a physically strong man of great cold-bloodedness and audacity. He is, in our opinion, subject to periodic attacks of erratic and homicidal mania. The nature of the mutilation suggests that the man may suffer from a sexual disorder called satyritis. The killer likely appears as a harmless, middle-aged gentleman, well-groomed and respectably dressed. We believe he habitually wears a cloak or a coat, I'll try combining it there, which would otherwise make it difficult for him to escape notice while fleeing through the streets of bloody hands or clothing. Assuming the killer appears in the manner we've described, we consider him to be solitary and eccentric individual. Additionally, he does not have a regular occupation but lives on a small earnings or allowance. So there were so many people when we was at the exhibition. They had like 10 suspects, and one of them is one that I'd heard of. It was a gentleman. He was Romanian, I believe. He got admitted to an asylum and he always professed that he was Jack the Ripper. He told them things that only the person who done that would know, but they deemed him insane and put him in an asylum. And then recently there's been a letter that's been discovered in Australia, and this is someone proclaiming to be Jack the Ripper. But there were so many false letters sent through because it seemed to glorify once again, and everyone wanted to be Jack the Ripper. And you saw some of these letters in the exhibition. Why you would want to glorify yourself to say, I'm him, I've got no idea. But 100 years later, in 1988, John Douglas, an FBI profiler, this is what he took from the crimes as to who he thinks it is. The killer is a white male between 28 and 36 years old who lived or worked in the Whitechapel area. During his childhood, his father figure was absent or passive. The murderer probably worked a job in where he could legally satisfy his destructive tendencies. He likely stopped killing because he was arrested for another crime or felt he was too close to being discovered. The killer probably had some physical defect, which was a great source of frustration or anger for him. He was likely of a low social standing with a humble job such as a butcher or a doctor's assistant. Now, when we was on the tour, they did say they believed a butcher because someone with knives and covered in blood, if he was in that industry, you wouldn't know if that was a human or animal blood. So yeah, that is very interesting. I think actually we're going to do a bit more on Jack the Ripper because there's just so much mystery to it. And I believe, I can't remember if I read it or if Dan told me, but they said even if they was to figure out who Jack the Ripper was now, they would never say, because obviously the generations down the line, imagine being told, oh, your great-great-great-great-great-granddad was Jack the Ripper. That could cause detrimental and disastrous effects to that family, because you could have generations of the victims. And yeah, so I think it might have actually been Dan that told me that they would never release who Jack the Ripper was, even if they was to find out, to try and protect all of the families. And then the last one, my lovelies, let's go. Everyone's like, let's go. I love this. The Moors murders at the same time was only a kid, and it's only now, having read and seen the documentaries, it sickens me how anyone can do that to a child, one of which has never been found. Jack the Ripper, who could have and should have been arrested well before one of the sons made a documentary, was very interesting and did a book called The Shadow Him and His Sister. Were only kids at the time. Oh, I need to look at that. And the last one, Fred and Rose West. Having heard and read what they did, it was sick. I will never understand what makes people do such horrible things and think they can get away with it. Love you loads. Love you loads too. That's the thing. It's almost like, do some people do it for the thrill? Do they do it for the buzz? The buzz of, I'm not going to get caught. Or the buzz and the adrenaline of, I could get caught. Or is there something neurologically that something's not formed right, something's developed wrong to make people go so adversely? And that is something that fascinates me. Science and biology always fascinated me because the brain, I feel, we don't know what it's capable of. Is this, when people go that way, shows what the brain is capable of, but to the bad side? What could it be done to the good side? Could we levitate things? Could we manifest? You know what I mean? But it's just all of that side, and that's why I will always say, I've got it down here, guys. That's it. It's just my books falling. falling. This book, I will recommend this always. Hidden Valley Road, because that is about siblings of all who had mental illnesses. They believed it was through the mother's behaviour bringing them up, and when they passed, they had their brains donated to medical science, and they was able to see, right, that one had that and he had that, so that's why they were both like, it fascinates the life out of me. But I hope that we never ever see levels of this in our lifetime ever again, because I just think it's heinous and it's not nice. But I tell you what, guys, I'm very happy that we've kicked the year off like this. I feel Scandals with Shan is going to be a good one this year. If there is any serial killers, true crime stories, attacks, I don't know, escapades, Scandals with Shan is not just all about serial killers, it is also about conspiracies. So if you have any conspiracy theories, which I have a book there as well on it, we can go through them. So any new scandals, conspiracies, serial killer, true crime, anything you want me to have a little look into, please do let me know, okay? Because I'm enjoying this little series. This is probably one of my funniest series to film. I can't lie, I absolutely love it. But if you did enjoy the video, oh god, guys, it's been a long day. If you did enjoy the video, you know what to do. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe down below. And as I say, leave me a comment. Anything you want me to do this year, whether it be a scandal, a conspiracy, a news headline, what's going on in the world, true crime, let me know. But take care, stay safe as always. And thank you for sitting with me for the first Scandals with Shan. Let's see what 2025 brings. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.